We step into a world that is both a breathtaking paradise and an unforgiving hell. A world where cries of a newborn baby were not a cause for celebration, but another entry in a ledger listed somewhere between livestock and barrels of sugar. Picture this: a tiny wooden cabin on a Jamaican sugar plantation in the late 1700s. A mother holds her baby for the first time, and in that sacred moment, she is faced with a soul-crushing certainty that the child in her arms is not hers. Its value is about 40 pounds sterling. This isn't just a story about the brutality of slavery. It is the story of the children who were born into it. In a system designed to crush their spirits before they could even form, they discovered a resilience so profound it would change the course of history. What I am about to share with you is not found in most textbooks. It is a story of secret societies formed in nurseries, of silent languages spoken in the fields, and of psychological skills so advanced they would challenge modern experts. These children were not just victims. They were survivors, innovators, and quiet warriors. I invite you to listen closely, because the story of their unbreakable will to survive is a testament to the incredible strength of the human spirit, a strength that echoes within all of us today. Let's travel back in time together. The air is thick with a sweet scent of tropical flowers and a metallic tang of sweat and fear. We are in the Caribbean, a place where fortunes were built on human suffering. For a woman named Sarah, a 19-year-old on the Worthy Park estate in Jamaica, the birth of her first child was a moment of profound conflict. The joy of motherhood was instantly poisoned by the devastating knowledge that her child's life was not its own. It belonged to someone else. In the cold, clinical account books of Plantation, which still exists in Jamaican archives, newborn children were recorded with chilling brevity. One Negro child, male, age, newborn value, that was the official record of a new human life. But those ledgers could never capture the reality of what happened in the slave quarters after dark. They couldn't record the whispered lullabies, ancient African melodies humming promises of a better world that the mother herself had never seen. They couldn't document the gentle touch of mother braiding tiny, protective charms into her child's hair, a small act of love and defiance in a world that offered none. Sarah's story was not unique. Across the Caribbean, an estimated 400,000 children were born directly into this life of bondage. Many of their mothers had been stolen from Africa, torn from their own families and traditions. They were now caught in a vicious cycle of loss, humming the same lullabies their own mothers might have sung to them in a world of freedom they could barely remember. To the plantation owners, of course, these births were a matter of business. A healthy baby represented a future laborer, a return on investment. Some planters even offered small rewards for births, an extra ration of cloth or food, perhaps a single day of rest from the fields. This was not kindness, it was asset management. Historical letters show that estate managers wrote to their employers in England discussing children's health with the same detachment they used for crop yields. One letter from 1789, preserved in the British National Archives, reads, "The increase in our Negro children this year shows promise for future productivity. We have implemented new feeding schedules for nursing mothers to ensure optimal survival rates. Children were reduced to future productivity metrics. Yet, in the face of the systematic dehumanization, something powerful and unyielding persisted. Mothers like Sarah held their children close and whispered stories of a world beyond the cane fields. They told tales of birds that could fly wherever they wished, of rivers that ran free to the sea, of a place where children could play without fear. These were not just bedtime stories. They were acts of rebellion. They were declarations that the human spirit could not be bought, sold, or owned. Often elderly women who had witnessed a lifetime of suffering developed their own quiet rituals. They would bless each newborn with whispered prayers, mixing the Christian words taught by missionaries with older African traditions. It was their way of saying, "You may be born into chains, little one, but your soul belongs to something greater." Archaeological digs on these plantation sites have uncovered fascinating traces of this hidden world of love. In the slave quarters, researchers have found small caches of buried items near where cribs would have been. Seashells, smooth stones, bits of colored glass. These were gifts of beauty and love that offered so little. Mothers would save tiny scraps of fabric to sew simple toys, creating something beautiful out of nothing for the children they adored. The names they gave their children tell their own story of resistance. While a plantation record might list a child as Negro Boy number 47 within his own community, he might be called Hope or Freedom or a name that carried a memory of a proud African ancestor. It was a way of insisting on an identity beyond that of property. But love and hope, no matter how powerful, could not protect these children from the brutal reality of their environment. Infant mortality rates were staggering, hovering around 50%. Half of all children born would not live to see their 5th birthday. Disease, malnutrition, and the harsh conditions of plantation life claimed so many tiny lives. Mothers learned to love fiercely, but also to brace their hearts for unimaginable loss. Crucible of tragedy. The children who did survive emerged with extraordinary resilience, almost supernatural ability to read the world around them, to find joy in the smallest of moments, and to build a community that would become their ultimate shield. They were learning, from their very first breath, that their survival depended not on the system that owned them, but on the love and strength they found in each other. Imagine you are 2 years old again. The world is a kaleidoscope of wonder, a grand adventure waiting to happen. Imagine that your playground is a Caribbean sugar plantation in 1787. This was the world of a little boy named Thomas, whose birth is recorded in the ledgers of the Rose Hall estate in Jamaica. As he took his first toddling steps, he entered a world of shocking contradictions. Picture Thomas stepping out of his family's dark cabin into the brilliant Caribbean morning. His senses would have been overwhelmed by breathtaking beauty. The sky was a shade of blue so vibrant it seemed unreal. Hummingbirds, like living jewels, danced between flowers of impossible color. The very air smelled of vanilla and tropical fruit. To a toddler's innocent mind, it was a fairy tale come to life. Indeed, historical accounts from European visitors often describe the Caribbean as nature's masterpiece. But as little Thomas, enchanted by a bright red flower, reached out his tiny hands to touch it, a sound would have frozen him in his tracks, followed by a human scream. In that single moment, Thomas would have learned the cruel lesson that defined his existence. He was living in a paradise built on hell. Archaeological evidence confirms this jarring proximity of beauty and brutality. The grand gardens of plantation houses were often located just yards away from whipping posts. Estate maps show that owners deliberately designed their properties so that the most scenic overlooks also provided a clear view of the work areas. Beauty and control were twisted together in the most sinister way. As Thomas explored his world, he would have been mesmerized by the birds. The Caribbean is home to over 170 species, from tiny emerald hummingbirds to magnificent frigate birds with 8-foot wingspans. To Thomas, these creatures represented something he didn't yet have the words for. They flew where they wished, built their nests in the tallest trees, and sang whenever they pleased. It is no surprise that archaeologists have found bird bones in the slave quarters, not from food, but carefully preserved as decorative items, symbols of the freedom they yearned for. Despite the harsh realities, these children developed an encyclopedic knowledge of the natural world. They could identify birds by their songs, predict the weather from the clouds, and navigate by the stars. Nature became their classroom. Plantation managers' journals are filled with complaints about children wasting time watching insects or collecting colorful stones. An overseer in 1789 wrote, "The Negro children show an alarming tendency to dawdle and examine every insect and flower. This distraction from useful activity must be discouraged." What the overseer saw as a distraction was, in fact, a survival mechanism. These children were learning to find joy in things that could not be taken from them. They were building what psychologists today call resilience. In hidden corners of the plantation, children created what they called treasure gardens. They would plant seeds they found, arrange pretty stones, and create sculptures from mud and sticks. They were secret spaces of beauty in a world that sought to deny them any from his dusty yard. Thomas could also see the great house, the magnificent mansion where the plantation owner lived. It was a palace of Italian marble, French furniture, and crystal chandeliers, a world of staggering wealth. Inventories from the era show that the value of the Persian carpets in one house was more than the combined value of 15 enslaved children. Thomas would see children his own age, the owner's children, playing on manicured lawns with beautiful toys. The complexity of the situation is staggering, especially as some of those children playing on a lawn might have been Thomas's own half-siblings. Mixed-race children of plantation owners often lived in a strange limbo, sometimes allowed to play in the great house in their early years before being sent to the fields as they grew older. A British visitor in 1788 wrote of the surreal sight of children of various complexions playing together in the morning, only to see some sent to labor, while others retired to tutors in the afternoon. The plantation was also a symphony of overwhelming sound. The rhythmic chop of sugarcane, the hiss of the boiling houses, and the constant hum of insects were interwoven with human sounds. Work songs, whispered conversations in a mix of African and European languages, and the chilling sounds of punishment. Acoustic archaeologists have recreated these soundscapes, revealing an incredibly complex auditory world. For a child like Thomas, learning to decipher these sounds was a crucial survival skill. He learned to distinguish the overseer's angry footsteps from a worker's tired shuffle. He learned which bird calls signaled rain, and which sounds from the great house meant the master was in a foul mood. But amid the noise and fear, he also learned to recognize the sound of hope, laughter from the children's play areas, and songs from the fields. Not just work songs, but songs of faith, memory, and dreams of a better day. Archaeologists have even found musical instruments crafted by the enslaved, drums from hollowed logs and flutes from bamboo. These were declarations that joy and culture would survive. The roots of modern Caribbean music, reggae, calypso, steel drum, can be traced back to the creativity of people who refused to let their spirits be broken. Young Thomas was learning to hold a world of contradictions in his small hands. He saw that beauty and suffering could exist in the same breath. He was learning that wonder is a choice. Even when the world is designed to crush your spirit, you can still marvel at a butterfly's wings. This ability to find light in the darkness was not just a coping mechanism. It was an act of resistance. We come to a part of this story that is almost completely unknown, a chapter that reveals a level of social genius that is simply astonishing. What happened when plantation owners, in a cold economic calculation, decided to group the youngest children together? They created something called the nursery system. And what emerged from these Spartan buildings was a testament to the incredible power of community and childhood ingenuity. Let me introduce you to Celia. According to records from a Hampton plantation in Jamaica, she was a 65-year-old woman in 1792. Her hands were too arthritic for field work and her back too bent for heavy labor. In the brutal economics of the plantation, she was deemed unproductive. She was made a nursery keeper. The overseers thought they were assigning her a simple, menial task. They had no idea they were about to witness the creation of a miniature, self-sustaining society. Picture a large wooden building, about 30 by 20 feet, with dirt floors and minimal furniture. Mothers would bring their children, aged anywhere from 6 months to 6 years, and leave them in Celia's care. One elderly woman was responsible for 30 to 40 children. It should have been chaos. Dr. Trevor Bernard's research into Jamaican plantation records reveals something incredible. Mortality rates for children in these nurseries were often lower than the plantation average. How was this possible? The answer lies with the brilliance of women like Celia and the children themselves. Celia's daily routine was a masterclass in early childhood education and emotional support. She would gather the children in a circle for what they called remember stories. These weren't just fairy tales. They were carefully coded lessons about their history, their heritage, and their self-worth. She told stories of clever animals outsmarting powerful hunters, and small creatures triumphing through wit rather than strength. The songs they sang taught them counting and memory skills, but also served as a way to regulate their emotions, techniques that modern child psychologists would recognize as highly sophisticated. Archaeological digs at former nursery sites have unearthed evidence of elaborate play structures made entirely from found materials. Children built dollhouses from broken pottery and created intricate games using pebbles and shells. At the Rose Hall plantation site, they found a miniature village, complete with tiny houses and a market, where children rehearse a future where they might have agency. Celia's most brilliant innovation was what we might now call a peer teaching system. Overseers' documents note the unusual orderliness of the nurseries. This was because Celia had created a structured hierarchy where older children were responsible for younger ones. 6-year-olds helped feed toddlers. 4-year-olds taught 2-year-olds simple songs. This wasn't just about logistics. In a world designed to make them feel worthless, Celia was teaching these children that their value came from what they could give to each other. She was also teaching them to be psychological detectives. Overseer journals from 1794 express frustration with nursery children who seemed to have an uncanny ability. They would suddenly fall silent or move away from certain areas just before an overseer appeared in a rage. Celia had taught them to read environmental cues, the sound of different footsteps, the way a horse was tied, the subtle shifts in an adult's facial expression. They also developed remarkable conflict resolution skills. In a crowded space with minimal adult supervision, fights could have been constant. Visitors described the nurseries as surprisingly peaceful. When conflict arose, older children facilitated discussions where both parties had explained their feelings and worked together to find solution. Plantation owners began to notice that children from these nurseries grew up to be what they called easier to manage. They mistook this for obedience. These children were learning something far more powerful: emotional regulation, community cooperation, and how to maintain their humanity under dehumanizing conditions. They were developing what we now call emotional intelligence. Let's not romanticize this. The nursery system existed because mothers were forced into backbreaking labor just weeks after giving birth. The emotional toll of this daily separation was immense. Within this painful reality, people like Celia created something beautiful. A visitor named William Beckford wrote in 1790 that he observed the children showed their age-keeper a tenderness and respect that seemed to exceed even that shown to their natural parents. In a world where biological families were constantly threatened, these children were learning that family could be created through love and care. Celia became a grandmother to dozens of children who desperately needed one. Their games were a form of therapy. They played elaborate role reversal games, taking turns being masters and servants, allowing them to process their reality. They played games where weak characters outsmarted strong ones, literally rebuilding their sense of self-worth every single day. As these children grew, nurtured by this incredible community, they carried with them a deep understanding of their own value and an unshakable belief in the power of cooperation. But childhood, even in this protected space, was fleeting. What happened when these children turned 6, the age at which they were officially deemed old enough to work? That transition from the nursery to the fields was a critical moment, one that would test everything Celia had taught them. At age 6, a child's life on a Caribbean plantation changed forever. This is the age of kindergarten in our world, a time for learning to tie shoes and play with toys. In 1798, it meant your childhood was officially over. Your economic value now outweighed your need for play, rest. A Quaker merchant named Josiah Martin visited the Golden Grove Plantation in Jamaica in 1799. Preserved in a friend's historical library in Philadelphia, gives us a heartbreakingly detailed look at this transition through the story of a 6-year-old girl named Ruby. Ruby's first job was bird scarer. It sounds almost innocent. The reality was devastating. At dawn, I observed little Ruby positioned in the middle of a vast cane field, armed with nothing but a wooden clapper, to prevent birds from eating the young cane shoots. This child stands alone under the Caribbean sun, frantically waving her arms and making noise. A 6-year-old alone, held responsible for crop yields that could affect the plantation's entire profit margin if birds damaged the crops on her watch. But within 2 weeks, Martin observed something that amazed him. Ruby had transformed her grueling, lonely task into an opportunity. She created what Martin described as an intricate dance, incorporating her clapping and shouting into rhythmic patterns. She was not just surviving, she was problem-solving. She had figured out that different birds were deterred by different sounds and movements. The 6-year-old was conducting her own agricultural research. Records from Golden Grove show that Ruby's section of the field consistently had lower bird damage than areas monitored by adults. Ruby's job was just one part of what managers call the graduated labor system, a chillingly systematic approach to extracting value from childhood. Children aged 6 to 8 were assigned so-called light duties, involved crawling on hands and knees for hours to pull weeds, a task that often led to permanently curved spines and chronic pain. Plantation medical records from the era document these physical deformities in children. Then there was stone picking, clearing acres of field of rocks that could damage plows. And one of the most demanding jobs was water carrying. Children aged 7 to 10 would haul heavy water containers, often weighing nearly half their own body weight, for miles each day in the tropical heat. The children's intelligence and resilience shone through. Water carriers developed sophisticated relay systems to make their loads more manageable. Grass gangs worked in coordinated formations, turning the monotonous work into competitive games that increased their productivity. Bird scarers like Ruby worked in networks across multiple fields, using their noisemakers to send coded signals to each other, warning of approaching overseers or dangerous animals. They turned their work into an education. Children in the fields became learning to identify dozens of plants and understand agricultural cycles. Estate letters reveal owners' surprise at the children's insights. One manager wrote in 1802 that the children's predictions about harvest timing had proven more reliable than those of our experienced overseers. The psychological impact of this transition was immense. Children who had been playful in the nursery became quiet and serious. Play found a way to survive. They incorporated it into their work whenever possible. Rock collecting became treasure hunting. Weeding was turned into games with songs and rhymes. Archaeologists have found toys and game pieces, dolls from corn husks, marbles from clay, in the field areas, small sources of joy they carried with them. They also faced a complex psychological burden. Excelling at work meant being promoted to harder labor sooner. Poor performance meant punishment. They had to learn to navigate this impossible balance. Overseer reports reveal that children who managed to maintain some creativity and playfulness in their work were often more productive than those who became completely serious. And they learned to protect each other. Older children would quietly help younger ones meet their quotas. Stronger children would share the burden of weaker ones. They understood that their survival was collective. If one failed, the whole group might be punished. This wasn't just kindness. It was a sophisticated survival strategy. As these 6-year-olds adapted to their new lives as laborers, they were about to encounter an even greater challenge. Learning to survive the work was only the beginning. The real test would be learning to survive the complex social system of the plantation, a web of power, hierarchy, and danger that would demand a whole new level of intelligence and resilience. What I am about to tell you now is one of the most remarkable examples of human intelligence you will ever hear. As these children left the nursery and entered the wider plantation world, they didn't just survive. They became masters of an invisible curriculum, a secret education in reading people, decoding danger, and manipulating their environment. The penalty for failing this curriculum was severe. There were no second chances. The private journals of a plantation bookkeeper named James Stewart, discovered in a London attic in 1987, give us an incredibly detailed window into this world. Stewart worked at the Cambridge estate in Barbados in the late 1790s, and he was a meticulous observer. He wrote about a 6-year-old boy named Marcus. Within just 3 months of leaving the nursery, this child had mastered a social skill set that would challenge a trained psychologist today. The boy Marcus displays an almost supernatural ability to anticipate the moods and intentions of every person on this estate. He can tell from 20 paces whether the overseer has been drinking, whether the master's wife is displeased, or whether a particular field hand is likely to cause trouble. Marcus wasn't born with this skill. He learned it through a survival curriculum passed down from older children with the intensity of military training. On a plantation, misreading a person could mean the difference between a normal day and a brutal punishment. Let's break down this invisible education. I-learning, the art of observing everything without being noticed. Older children taught younger ones to use their peripheral vision while keeping their heads down. They practiced reading microexpressions, the tiny facial twitches that betray emotion. They developed an incredible awareness of body language and vocal tones. Plantation doctors noted that these children had unusually advanced sensory acuity, not realizing it was a result of intensive survival training. Marcus and his friends could distinguish between 17 different types of footsteps, identify if the person approaching was angry, drunk, or sad just by the rhythm of their walk. Stewart's journals describe a teaching chain, a sophisticated mentorship system where each child was responsible for training the one younger than them. 7-year-olds learned face reading. 8-year-olds mastered voice knowing, detecting lies or danger in vocal tones. 9-year-olds studied body talking. By age 10, they were expected to be expert situation seers, able to predict the outcomes of complex social dynamics. They also became masters of de-escalation. Stewart recorded an incident where Marcus, then 9, approached an overseer who was in a rage about some missing tools. Rather than cowering, the boy managed to redirect the man's attention to the excellent condition of the cane in his assigned section. The overseer's mood had completely shifted, and a situation that could have ended in a severe whipping instead ended with commendations for the workers. How did a 9-year-old learn to manipulate adult emotions with such skill? Through practice playing. In their few free moments, they would role-play scenarios, taking turns being overseers and masters. They practiced expressions of humility, confusion, or gratitude until they could perform them flawlessly under pressure. The children display remarkable acting abilities. I myself am often convinced of their sincerity, even knowing it to be performance. This required what psychologists call cognitive flexibility. A child might need to appear obedient to an overseer while secretly communicating a warning to other workers. all at the same time. This complex social navigation actually enhanced their brain development in measurable ways. They also developed a system of nonverbal communication that was invisible to their oppressors. Overseers wrote with frustration about the children's mysterious coordination. This was a network that used everything from the way laundry was hung to the arrangement of stones near a cabin door. A certain pattern could warn of an overseer's bad mood or signal that punishment was coming. They became masters of mood shifting, subtly influencing the emotional atmosphere around them. They knew when a well-timed song might soothe an agitated group or when silence was the safest response. Stewart wrote of his amazement at watching Marcus calm a crying baby while simultaneously signaling to other children about a dangerous overseer, all while appearing to be focused on his assigned task. And they learned to protect each other. Older children would quietly cover for the mistakes of younger ones. Quick thinkers would create distractions to help others avoid punishment. I am constantly amazed by the children's ability to function as a single organism. They seem to communicate and coordinate with an efficiency that surpasses many adult organizations. Witnessing was the power of collective survival. These children understood that their individual safety depended on the group's success. They had learned to think of themselves not as separate individuals, but as interdependent members of a community. The sophistication of their emotional intelligence was staggering. But all of this preparation, all of these advanced survival skills, were leading to a moment that every child dreaded, the day their childhood officially ended and they entered the adult workforce, facing a whole new level of danger. As we continue our journey, I want to ask you to do something. If these stories of incredible resilience and the unbreakable human spirit are resonating with you, to hit that subscribe button. By joining our community, you help me bring these vital, often forgotten histories to light for more people. And I'd love to connect with you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Knowing we're sharing this journey together from all corners of the world makes it all the more meaningful. Let's return to the story. Nothing could prepare a child for the auction block. It was a place where the fiction of plantation life, with its complex relationships and routines, was stripped away, revealing the brutal truth. These human beings were property, to be bought and sold like furniture. The personal diary of a slave auctioneer named William Harrison, who worked the Caribbean markets in the early 1800s, gives us a chilling, first-hand account of his horror and its devastating impact on children. Harrison wrote about a 9-year-old boy named Samuel. In March of 1812, the owner of his plantation died, and the entire estate, including its people, was liquidated. Samuel stood on the auction block in Kingston, Jamaica, with his entire extended family, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. The boy Samuel displayed an unusual composure. It was only when bidding began for his father that I observed the child's demeanor change dramatically. Samuel's father was sold first to a sugar planter from another island. Samuel watched his father be led away, knowing he would never see him again. But he did not cry out. At 9 years old, he had already learned that emotional displays could result in punishment or even harsher separation. So he stood silent and still as his world was systematically destroyed. His mother was sold to a coffee plantation in the mountains, his older brother to a rum distillery, his younger sister to a household 50 miles away. In 3 hours, a family was scattered across an island with no hope of ever reuniting. And Samuel, a 9-year-old boy, understood exactly what was happening. But what happened next reveals a remarkable strength forged in these children. As Samuel was led away by his new owner, Harrison noted that the boy began to hum a soft, what the auctioneer saw as a strange response. We now understand was an act of incredible resilience. Samuel was using one of the coded songs of the Resistance Network. He was sending a message to any other children in the crowd who might know the code, a message containing information. Final attempt to maintain a thread of connection to his lost family. Dr. Michael Tadman's research shows that approximately 75% of children under 12 were separated from their parents during these sales. This constant threat of loss fundamentally changed how children understood attachment and love. They learned that any relationship could end suddenly and permanently. Somehow, they developed coping mechanisms that allowed them to continue caring for each other. In 1814, Harrison recorded the sale of 2 sisters, aged 7 and 10. They were to be auctioned separately. Grace did something that amazed everyone. She requested permission to speak, and then gave what Harrison described as a sales presentation, arguing that she and her sister worked more efficiently together and that their combined value was greater than the sum of their individual worth. A 10-year-old girl, facing the loss of her only remaining family member, negotiated with slave buyers. A planter was so impressed he purchased both sisters. But for every Grace, there were thousands of Samuels, arriving alone on new plantations, had to learn new communication codes and build new relationships, all while grieving the loss of everyone they had ever loved. They found ways to build new families. Overseer reports mention how quickly new children were adopted by existing families in the slave quarters. They developed elaborate systems of surrogate kinship, where chosen family became as important, if not more so, than blood relatives. They developed what psychologists might call resilient attachment, the ability to form deep, meaningful connections while maintaining enough emotional independence to survive separation. Harrison misinterpreted this as emotional detachment, but it was, in fact, a sophisticated form of emotional intelligence. They learned to hold love and loss in their hearts at the same time, and they never gave up hope of reunion. They developed rituals to keep memories alive, telling stories of separated family members to younger children. They used their intelligence networks to gather information, listening for news from traveling traders or newly arrived slaves. A 9-year-old like Samuel was forced to navigate adult emotions of love, loss, and despair. Rather than becoming hardened, many of these children developed an extraordinary capacity for empathy. Having known the deepest loss, they became incredibly sensitive to the pain of others. This emotional wisdom will be tested in yet another psychologically complex situation: their relationship with the children of their oppressors. On the great house lawn, two children might play together, laughing and sharing secrets, forging a genuine friendship. But one of these children legally owned the other. Navigating this impossible reality was a daily challenge. The letters of the plantation mistress, named Elizabeth Beckford, give us a window. Her son, William, and an enslaved girl named Phyllis, born just 2 months apart, were inseparable companions. Mrs. Beckford wrote, "They share meals, play the same games. I confess I sometimes forget the difference in their stations." But the children were learning. By age 6, Phyllis had begun to show what her mistress called instinctive deference, addressing William as Master William without being told. This 6-year-old was learning to perform subordination while maintaining a genuine friendship, a psychological balancing act of incredible complexity. William, in turn, experienced what historians call moral dissonance, a conflict between his affection for his friend and the social expectations of his role as a future master. In one revealing incident, 6-year-old William was being punished by his tutor. Trying to protect him, claimed responsibility and volunteered to take his punishment. This act of loyalty from a legally powerless child trying to protect the one who held power over her reveals the profound moral contradictions of their world. They created their own private spaces, behind gardens and hidden rooms, where the plantation hierarchy didn't apply. They could play as equals, sometimes even reversing roles, with Phyllis playing the mistress and William the servant. They were using play to try and make sense of their incomprehensible world. But as they approached adolescence, these fragile friendships were inevitably fractured. William was sent away for formal education. Phyllis was assigned to full-time household duties. The emotional bonds often lasted a lifetime, but they were forced into a new, rigid hierarchy. Enslaved children who had been childhood companions were often assigned roles as personal servants, positions that required trust and close contact but maintained clear power dynamics. These children, both enslaved and free, were forced to develop an extraordinary understanding of human complexity. But all of this psychological sophistication was about to be tested in the most brutal way possible, because beneath the intricate social dynamics of plantation life lay the constant, terrifying threat of physical violence. The sound never left them. For the rest of their lives, long after emancipation, the sharp crack of a tree branch could make an elderly man flinch. It was a sound that ruled every plantation, the crack of the overseer's whip. Children as young as 5 learned to live with the knowledge that violence could erupt at any moment. The private journal of an overseer named Patrick Lynch provides a chilling, matter-of-fact account of how children were educated in fear. He wrote about a 7-year-old boy named Daniel who had been caught asking too many questions. Lynch wrote on June 3, 1817, "Today I provided Daniel with his first formal lesson in obedience. 3 lashes with the small whip. The demonstration appeared effective, as the other children have shown improved attention to their duties. 3 lashes for asking question." But Lynch also documented the aftermath. Within days, Daniel had helped organize the other children into an early warning system, with lookouts assigned to monitor the overseer's moods and movements. A 7-year-old's trauma response had been transformed into a community survival strategy. Children learned to dissociate, a psychological defense where they mentally separated themselves from pain. Lynch noted with puzzlement their unusual calmness after punishments, interpreting it as detachment when it was a complex trauma response. They also learned to weaponize their vulnerability. A 9-year-old girl named Mercy, who had broken a water jug, displayed such convincing distress that Lynch reduced her intended punishment by half. He suspected her emotional display was calculated, and he was probably right. She was using her oppressor's psychology against him. Most remarkably, they learned to protect each other. Lynch wrote with frustration about the mysterious redistribution of blame. When one child made a mistake, others would step forward to claim partial responsibility, distributing the punishment among the group. It was collective resistance disguised as collective guilt. Archaeologists have found hidden caches of healing supplies, herbs and clean cloths, near punishment areas, evidence of their own secret medical support systems. Lynch was baffled by their ability to return to play and laughter so quickly after witnessing or experiencing brutality. He saw it as a concerning indifference. In reality, it was post-traumatic growth. It was a testament to their incredible ability to preserve their humanity and their capacity for joy despite systematic attempts to break their spirits. They learned to read their oppressors with expert accuracy, identifying patterns of behavior, like an overseer's drinking habits, that signaled increased danger. They learned to live with multiple selves, a public self that was obedient and submissive, and a private self that held on to their true identity. This psychological splitting was a survival strategy, and it was this strength, forged in the crucible of fear, that laid the foundation for the next stage of their evolution: active, deliberate, and ingenious resistance.